The hiss of the espresso machine behind the counter was a long, angry sigh. It was the only sound in the world for a full 10 seconds. It filled the space left by his words, a hot steam of noise where a moment before there had been the comfortable clink of ceramic on saucer, the low murmur of a Saturday morning in the French Quarter. My own cup of coffee sat untouched. A perfect, glossy heart swirled into the foam. It was going cold. Garrett didn't seem to notice. He hadn't looked up from his phone when he said it, his thumbs still swiping through whatever held his attention. The sentence had landed with the same flat, transactional tone he'd used to order his double macchiato moments earlier. No inflection, no malice. Just a statement of fact, as obvious and unremarkable to him as the price on the menu. Honestly, women like you are easy to replace. Don't take it personal. The world didn't shatter. It didn't crack or explode. It simply stopped. The ambient noise of the cafe, the scent of chicory and burnt sugar, the warmth of the sun through the large plate glass window. It all receded, becoming a diorama I was observing from a great, silent distance. I could see my own hands resting on the table, steady. I could see the condensation beating on my glass of water. I could see the slight frown of concentration on my husband's face as he finally found the email he was looking for. Everything was exactly as it had been, but the physics of the room had changed. The air was heavier. My breath was a foreign object in my own lungs. He had taken the woman I was, the life we had built, the 6 years of our marriage, and filed it under interchangeable parts. My name is Naima. I am 33 years old. Garrett, my husband, is 36. We had been married for 6 years, together for 8. Long enough for the routines to set like concrete, for the language between us to become a series of shortcuts and assumptions. In my professional life, I'm a corporate travel auditor. It's a job of details, of cross-referencing and verification. I look at a person's expense report, their flights, their hotels, their per diem meals, and I check it against their itinerary and company policy. My entire career is based on a simple principle. You look at what was claimed, and you verify it against what is true. A discrepancy isn't a judgment. It's just a gap between the story someone is telling and the reality the receipts reveal. For years, I had been auditing the wrong balance sheets. I had spent my days flagging fraudulent taxi receipts and unapproved hotel upgrades, and spent my nights living inside a marriage that was, I suddenly understood, the largest unexamined expense report of my life. The claim was love. The claim was partnership. The claim was us. But the receipts, the tiny, accumulating daily receipts of our life together, told a different story. A story of unreciprocated labor, of assumed support, of a value that was measured only in its utility. And the sentence he had just spoken, so casually, over coffee on what was supposed to be our anniversary morning, wasn't an anomaly. It was the final audit summary. It was the line item that exposed the entire fraud. We were at Café du Monde earlier, the scent of powdered sugar and hot beignets, a sweet, sticky cloud in the humid New Orleans air. It was our tradition, our 6th anniversary. I had put on the blue linen dress he liked, and he'd actually put his phone away for a whole 20 minutes. We'd talked about his new consulting project, the one that was supposed to be his big break. He was excited, animated, his hands gesturing as he laid out the scope and the potential revenue. I listened, asked questions, and felt that familiar swell of pride. His success felt like my success, our success. Then we'd walked here to a quieter place for actual coffee, and the spell had broken. The phone had come back out. He was scrolling through messages from a colleague, a man named Marcus who was always held up as the gold standard of success. "Marcus is killing it," Garrett murmured, more to his screen than to me. "He's got his whole back office streamlined. Hired a virtual assistant. Says it's changed the game." I smiled a little tightly. "That's great for him." "Yeah," he continued, still scrolling. "It just makes everything so much smoother. You know, you don't have to sweat the small stuff. The logistics, the admin, you just offload it." He finally looked up, but not at me. He was looking through me at an idea of efficiency he was building in his head. "Honestly," he said, and this is when the world stopped. "Women like you are easy to replace. Don't take it personal." He gestured vaguely with his phone. "I mean, for that stuff. The support role. It's a skill set, a valuable one for sure. But it's not unique." He took a sip of his macchiato, his eyes already back on the screen. He had no idea what he had just done. He had just audited our entire marriage and signed the bottom line in red ink. He had taken my love, my support, my tireless invisible work, and classified it as a line item under administrative services. And the most devastating part wasn't the assessment itself. It was the casual, offhand delivery, the utter lack of awareness that he was describing his wife, the woman sitting opposite him whose heart was quietly ceasing to beat in her chest. He said, "Don't take it personal," because to him, it wasn't personal. It was business. I didn't say anything. I just watched him. And as I watched, the last 8 years began to unspool in my mind, not as a story of love, but as a long and detailed ledger of my own labor. The archaeology of disrespect began right there, in the silence of that cafe, with the hiss of the espresso machine as its soundtrack. It hadn't started this way. Of course, it never does. In the beginning, my help was a gift, an act of love. Garrett was brilliant and charming, with 100 brilliant ideas that always seemed to get tangled in the weeds of execution. I was the one who could see the path through the weeds. My mind just worked that way. I could organize chaos. It was my talent, and I loved using it to help him. It felt like we were a team, building something together. His vision, my structure. The first major project was his website. He had a vision for a sleek, professional consulting hub. He spent weeks sketching logos and writing grand mission statements. I was the one who spent nights teaching myself WordPress, comparing hosting plans, setting up the payment gateway, and proofreading every single word of his copy. When it launched, our friends were amazed. "Garrett, this is incredible," they'd say. "You're a genius." He would smile, a broad, handsome smile, and say, "Thanks, man. Put a lot of work into it." He never said, "Naima built the whole thing." He'd say, "Naima helped me with some of the tech stuff." It was a subtle downgrade, a shift from partner to assistant, but I told myself I was being sensitive. His success was our success. That was the company line. Then came the Sundays. For the last 4 years, nearly every Sunday morning was dedicated to what we called Garrett's admin. I would sit at our big kitchen island, my laptop open, a mug of coffee steaming beside me. He would hand me a shoebox or a crumpled envelope full of receipts from his business trips. My job was to turn that chaos into a clean, itemized expense report for his clients and a reconciled ledger for our accountant. I sorted gas receipts from meal receipts, cross-referenced mileage logs with his calendar, flagged hotel folios that needed to be rebilled. It was a meticulous, thankless task. It was, essentially, the work of a bookkeeper, a job people get paid for. I did it for free, every single week. I can picture one of those Sundays so clearly. The air in our home was thick with the smell of chicory from the coffee I'd brewed. Sunlight streamed into the kitchen, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. I had his receipts spread out in neat piles: travel, meals, supplies, client entertainment. He was on the sofa in the living room, a space adjacent to the kitchen, watching a football game. The sounds of the commentators and the fake stadium cheers were a constant, droning backdrop to the quiet click of my keyboard. Around 11, he wandered into the kitchen. He leaned against the counter, looking over my shoulder at the spreadsheet I'd built to track his variable income. "Looks good, babe," he said, his eyes on the TV over my head. "You're good at the logistics part. That's your strength." It was meant to be a compliment. I knew that, but it landed with a thud. It wasn't, "We are good at this," or "Thank you for doing this." It was a classification. He was the visionary, the talent, the star player on the field. I was logistics. I was the equipment manager, the person ensuring the jerseys were clean and the schedule was correct. Necessary, yes, but fundamentally separate from the game itself. He opened the cabinet. "Want another coffee?" he asked, holding up a pod for the Nespresso machine. A machine I had researched for weeks, bought for his birthday, and descaled every month because he never remembered how. "No, I'm good," I said quietly, my eyes fixed on a receipt from a steakhouse in Dallas. It was for 2 people. He'd been traveling alone. A small discrepancy. I let it go. I was always letting them go. The pattern of erasure wasn't just domestic. It was professional. Last year, he decided he needed his Project Management Professional Certification, the PMP. It was a huge step for his career, he said. It would allow him to bid on bigger contracts. He was right. It was a smart move. But Garrett wasn't a planner. He was a starter. He bought the study guide, and it sat on his nightstand for 3 months, gathering dust. The deadline for the exam registration was approaching. I saw it on the calendar I managed for both of us. "Gee, you need to sign up for the PMP exam if you're going to do it this year," I told him one night. He sighed, running a hand over his face. I know. It's just so much damn paperwork. And the fee is insane right now. Maybe I'll wait." I knew what that meant. Waiting was Garrett's term for not doing. The next day, while on my lunch break, I went to the PMI website. I filled out the entire application for him, meticulously documenting his project experience based on the files I had on our shared drive. I paid the $555 renewal and exam fee with my own credit card. I told myself it was an investment in us. When I got home, I told him, "I registered you for the PMP exam. It's in 6 weeks at the testing center on Poydras. I put it in your calendar." His face lit up. "Seriously? Babe, you are a lifesaver. Thank you." He kissed me, a quick, grateful peck. For the next 6 weeks, I quizzed him with flashcards while we cooked dinner. I scheduled his study time. On the day of the exam, I drove him there, the New Orleans air already a heavy, wet blanket at 8 in the morning. I sat in a coffee shop for 4 hours, my stomach in knots for him. When he walked out, grinning, holding up a thumb, I felt a rush of pure, unadulterated joy. We did it. That night, he posted his official certificate on LinkedIn. It was a long, effusive post. He thanked his company, his clients, and his mentor, a senior consultant named David who he'd had lunch with twice. He tagged them all. He wrote about the long hours of study and the dedication it took to achieve this milestone. He never mentioned my name, not once. I read the post and the comments pouring in. "Congrats, man. Well deserved. Hard work pays off." And something in me went cold and still. The joy from that afternoon curdled into a hard, indigestible knot in my stomach. It was a contaminated memory. The pride I felt for him was retroactively poisoned by the knowledge that, in the public narrative of his life, my contribution didn't even warrant a footnote. He hadn't just omitted my help. He had claimed my labor as his own solitary hard work. This year, it was taxes. His consulting work meant a mess of 1099s and deductible expenses. My side of our shared home office desk was neat, my W-2 and organized contribution receipts in a tidy folder. His side was a testament to chaos, the proverbial shoebox, overflowing with unsorted receipts, mixed in with parking stubs and old boarding passes. For the third year in a row, April arrived and he was nowhere near ready. "I just don't have time to deal with this, Naima," he said, gesturing at the pile with a helpless frustration that I knew was my cue. "This new project is eating me alive." So I dealt with it. I spent a weekend sorting, scanning, and categorizing. I created the spreadsheets. I realized there was no way we would make the deadline, so I filed the extension myself. I calculated his estimated quarterly payment to avoid a penalty and paid it from our joint account, an account that my salary disproportionately funded. A few days later, I was in the kitchen when he was on the phone with his brother James. I heard my name and paused, my hand hovering over the sink. "Yeah, man, taxes are a beast," Garrett was saying, his voice full of casual confidence. "But we're on top of it. Naima and I have a good system down. We knocked it out this weekend." "We." The word hung in the air. Who is we? I wanted to scream. We did not knock it out. We do not have a system. I have a system. You have a shoebox. I spent my weekend cleaning up your mess while you watched golf, and you have the audacity to claim it as a team victory? But I said nothing. I just stood there, gripping the edge of the counter, and added it to the ledger. Another claim, another discrepancy. The worst part was how he framed it all. He wasn't ungrateful, not exactly. He was just oblivious. He saw my work not as a loving contribution, but as a feature of his environment, like reliable plumbing or a functioning electrical grid. It was just there, working in the background, and only noticeable if it stopped. He even tried to frame it as a sign of his own success. After the PMP certification, he started getting more attention from senior people in his field. He was feeling himself, carrying himself with a new swagger. We were at a backyard barbecue with some of his colleagues. I was inside, helping the host, Maria, bring out more food. I came back outside to hear Garrett holding court with two other men. "The key is delegation," he was saying, gesturing with his beer bottle. "You can't get bogged down in the minutia. You have to focus on the high-level strategy." One of the men, a guy named Rob, laughed. "Easy for you to say. My wife wouldn't know a 1099 from a W9. Garrett smiled, a smooth, knowing smile. He glanced over at me as I set a bowl of potato salad on the table. "Yeah, well, most guys at my level have someone like you handling things." He said, "like you," but he was looking right at me. He was boasting. He was telling his friends that he had, in effect, a full-time unpaid executive assistant. He wasn't presenting me as his partner. He was presenting me as his staff. In his mind, this was a compliment. It was proof of his status. He was a guy at his level, and I was the someone who handled things. I remember forcing a smile, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. Maria, who had followed me out, gave me a sharp, questioning look. She had heard it too. Later, as we were cleaning up in the kitchen, she touched my arm. "You okay?" she asked quietly. "Yeah, fine," I lied. "He's just proud of how we manage things." Even as I said it, the words tasted like ash in my mouth. I was still running interference for him, still managing the narrative, still auditing the books in his favor, cooking the numbers to make the story of our marriage look solvent. And so, sitting in that cafe, with my coffee getting cold and my husband scrolling through his phone, all of these moments, the website, the Sundays, the PMP, the taxes, the barbecue, came rushing back. They weren't isolated incidents. They were data points in a clear and devastating trend line. They were the receipts that proved his casual, cruel statement was not a slip of the tongue. It was a summary of his core belief. I was a role, a set of functions, a person who handled things, and roles, by their very nature, are replaceable. I finally picked up my cup. The ceramic was cool to the touch. The beautiful latte art heart had dissolved into a muddy brown swirl. It seemed fitting. I took a sip. It was bitter. "What's wrong?" Garrett asked, finally noticing my silence. He looked up, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. My mood was an inconvenience, a disruption to his Saturday morning flow. I looked at him. I really looked at him. I tried to see the man I had married, the man I had loved and supported and built a life with. But all I could see was a stranger with a fraudulent expense report for a soul. The discrepancy between the man he presented himself as and the man who was actually sitting before me was too vast to reconcile. The audit was complete. "Nothing," I said. My voice was even, quiet. "I'm just tired." And that was the truth. It wasn't a sudden, fiery anger. It was a deep, profound, bone-weary exhaustion. The exhaustion of 1,000 small cuts. The exhaustion of holding up a 2-person structure by yourself for years, only to be told that your support beam is generic and easily sourced from any hardware store. He accepted my answer without question. "Yeah, you've been working hard," he said, already turning his attention back to his phone. He had no idea I wasn't talking about my job. I was talking about him. He was the work, and I was quitting. The clarity that settled over me was terrifying in its stillness. It wasn't a storm, it was the eerie, absolute calm at the center of a hurricane. All the noise in my head, the justifications, the rationalizations, the endless loop of "he doesn't mean it," went silent. In its place was a single, simple, unassailable fact. I could not spend one more day of my life being the unpaid administrator of the man who saw me as replaceable. As an auditor, you learn that the most revealing discoveries aren't in the shouted arguments or the dramatic confrontations. They're in the quiet details. The coffee-stained receipt from a city the employee was never supposed to be in, the signature that doesn't quite match. Garrett's revelation wasn't in the cruelty of his words, but in the absolute absence of any weight he gave them. He said it the way one orders a coffee, the way one notes the time. It was a piece of data, delivered without emotion. That was the detail that signed the final report. He didn't see me as a person to be hurt. He saw me as a system whose function he was evaluating. And in that moment, the entire emotional infrastructure of our marriage collapsed. It wasn't a demolition. It was a quiet, internal implosion, leaving nothing but a fine layer of dust. We walked home in a silence that was different from our usual comfortable quiet. This was a charged, humming silence. He was oblivious, lost in his own world. I was hyper-aware of everything. The cracks in the sidewalk, the humid press of the air, the sound of my own footsteps on the pavement. Each step felt deliberate, final. I was walking out of one life, and though I didn't know it yet, toward another. Back at our apartment, he tossed his keys into the ceramic bowl by the door, the one I'd bought at the French market. "I've got to jump on a call with the West Coast team," he said, already shrugging off his jacket. Gotta prep for the Monday pitch." "Okay," I said. My voice sounded normal, which was a small miracle. He disappeared into his office and closed the door. The familiar sound of his booming work voice started a few moments later. It was the sound that had been the backdrop to so much of my unpaid labor. And in that moment, it became the soundtrack to my liberation. I walked to my laptop, which was sitting on the kitchen island, right where I conducted his Sunday audits. I opened it. The screen illuminated my face. I looked calm, resolute. I opened a browser window. The cursor blinked, waiting. My fingers, steady and sure, typed, "One-way flights from New Orleans to Raleigh-Durham." My Aunt Genevieve lived in Durham. She was my mother's sister, a woman who had been divorced for 20 years and lived a life that was unapologetically her own. She was my safe harbor. There was a flight at 3:45 p.m. It was 12:30 p.m. Without hesitating, I clicked purchase. I entered my own credit card information, not the joint one. This was my expense, my travel, my business. The confirmation email arrived 30 seconds later. MSY to RDU, Naima Evans, seat 14A. I stood up and walked into our bedroom. I pulled my largest suitcase from the top of the closet. The sound of the wheels on the hardwood floor was shockingly loud in the quiet apartment. I half expected Garrett to come out of his office, but his call was escalating in volume. He was selling an idea, making a pitch, completely absorbed in the narrative of his own importance. I packed with the methodical efficiency of a professional. I wasn't grabbing things in a panic. I was curating. I took my best clothes, the ones that made me feel like myself. I took my important documents, my laptop, the jewelry my grandmother had left me. I left behind the blue linen dress he liked. I left behind the framed photos of us on the nightstand. I left behind the woman who lived in this apartment. She wasn't me anymore. She was a role I was no longer willing to play. As I was zipping the suitcase, Garrett's office door opened. My heart didn't leap. It just stilled. He walked into the bedroom stretching. "That call was brutal," he said. Then he saw the suitcase on the bed. His face shifted from fatigue to confusion. "What's that? Are you going somewhere?" "Yes," I said, my voice even. "Where? A work trip? You didn't tell me you had a work trip." "It's not for work," I said. I closed the laptop on the dresser. He was trying to process the information, but it didn't fit into any of his known categories for my behavior. I was logistics. My travel was always planned, audited, and on our shared calendar. This was a discrepancy. "What are you talking about, Naima? Where are you going?" I looked at him then, and I decided to give him one last chance to understand, to see. "This morning," I said, keeping my voice low and steady. "At the cafe. What you said." He frowned, genuinely confused. "What? About Marcus? About the VA?" "No," I said. "About me." He stared at me, and I could see him mentally rewinding the tape of the morning. A flicker of recognition crossed his face, followed immediately by defensive annoyance. "Oh, for God's sake," he said, waving a dismissive hand. "You're still on that? I wasn't talking about you." "Who were you talking about, Garrett?" "I was talking about the role, the function." He was getting exasperated now, as if I were a dense employee who couldn't grasp a simple concept. "I'm not saying you specifically. I mean the role, the stuff you do, the admin side of things. It's not a personal attack." And there it was. He was confirming it. He was underlining the very thing that had broken me. He had neatly separated me, the person, from my function, the role. And he could not understand why that was a fatal wound. He thought he was clarifying. He thought he was fixing it. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just nodded. A small, final acknowledgement. I see, I said. It was the calmest I had felt all day. He had just handed me the final, signed-off audit report, complete with his own signature. Good, he said, relieved. So, can you unpack now? You're being a little dramatic. I gave him a small, sad smile. I picked up my purse. The role has been vacated, Garrett, I said quietly. I walked past him, pulling my suitcase behind me. The wheels seemed to echo on the floor. What does that even mean? He called after me, his voice a mixture of anger and confusion. Naima, where the hell are you going? I didn't answer. I walked to the front hall. On the small table by the door, there was an envelope. It was the anniversary card I had bought for him a week ago. I had written a long, heartfelt message inside about our journey, our partnership, our future. I'd left it there for him to sign this morning. It was still there, still unsigned. I took the card. I opened my purse and took out my wallet. I removed my passport. Then I took his. His was always in my purse because I was the one who managed our travel documents. I was the one who checked expiration dates and visa requirements. I placed his passport on the table. Next to it, I laid the unsigned anniversary card. The symbolism was so stark, so perfect, it was almost poetic. His future travel, which he now had to manage himself. And the past we were supposed to be celebrating, which he had forgotten to even acknowledge. That was my final report, my symbol. My phone buzzed with a notification. My ride was arriving. I walked out the front door and closed it gently behind me. I did not slam it. This was not an act of passion. It was an act of administration. A final, necessary piece of paperwork. The click of the lock was the sound of a file being closed. The ride to Louis Armstrong Airport was quiet. The city slid past my window, the vibrant, chaotic, beautiful city I had called home. I didn't feel sad. I felt a strange and profound numbness, the feeling of a limb that has been held in a painful position for too long and is only just now beginning to get the blood back. It was a pins and needles sensation of coming back to life. My phone started buzzing relentlessly in my purse. I knew it was him. I ignored it. Security was a blur. I moved through the lines with the practiced ease of a frequent flyer. My body knew the steps. Laptop out, shoes off, boarding pass ready. It was all so routine, yet it felt sacred. A ritual of departure. I found my gate and sat down. Only then did I take out my phone. 23 missed calls from Garrett. A string of texts, each more frantic than the last. Where are you? Naima. This isn't funny. Pick up your phone right now. Whatever is wrong, we can talk about it. Just come home. Did you see I left my passport? What the hell am I supposed to do? My trip to Toronto is in 3 weeks. That last one almost made me laugh. Even in his panic, his first thought was about the logistics I used to handle. He wasn't worried about losing me. He was worried about losing his travel agent. Then the tone of the texts shifted. The panic curdled into anger. You're being completely irrational and manipulative. This is so immature. After everything I do for us, you pull a stunt like this on our anniversary? Unbelievable. You're overreacting to a stupid comment. You're always so damn sensitive. I read the words, and they had no power over me. They were just the frantic flailings of a man who had just realized the plumbing had been shut off. He wasn't trying to understand my pain. He was trying to restore his service. I put the phone on silent and watched the planes take off and land. Each one lifting into the sky felt like a promise. The sky was vast and blue and full of possibility. My world had been so small for so long, confined to the four walls of our apartment and the narrow columns of his spreadsheets. An hour later, my phone rang again. It was him. For some reason, I decided to answer. I wanted to hear his voice one last time, not through the filter of a text message, but in real time. Naima! Oh my God, finally! He sounded out of breath, panicked. Where are you? Are you okay? I'm fine, Garrett. Where are you? Just tell me where you are. I'll come get you. I'm at the airport, I said calmly. There was a stunned silence on the other end. The airport? What are you doing at the airport? I'm waiting for a flight. A flight to where? For work? You can't just... He stopped, his voice cracking with a frantic edge. This was a new stage. The anger had burned off, leaving behind a raw, terrified vulnerability. Naima, please, come home. What I said this morning, I didn't mean it like that. I swear to God. How did you mean it? I asked. It was a genuine question, an auditor's question. I was asking him to clarify his claim. I meant the role is replaceable, not you. You knew what I meant. He had said it. The line from the card. The final, desperate attempt to reframe reality, to make his carelessness my misunderstanding. He was arguing semantics while our entire world was burning down. And in that moment, I felt a wave of something that was almost pity. He really didn't get it. He never would. I took a deep breath, the canned airport air filling my lungs. I thought about all the possible responses. I could scream. I could cry. I could list every single one of his transgressions, every receipt from the last 6 years. But I didn't. I chose a different path. I chose to use one of the mic drop lines I had learned in my quiet defiance. It was a correction, a way of taking his frame and replacing one word to change everything. No, Garrett, I said, my voice soft but clear. You didn't lose me because you misunderstood a role. I paused, letting the silence stretch. You lost me because you didn't choose me. I didn't wait for a response. I hung up the phone. I blocked his number. The boarding call for my flight to Durham began. I stood up, slung my bag over my shoulder, and walked toward the gate. I didn't look back. The flight was smooth. As the plane climbed above the clouds, I looked out the window at the patchwork of the Louisiana Delta below. I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't joy. It was the quiet, steady relief of a balance sheet that has finally been reconciled. There were no more discrepancies. There were no more cooked books. There was only the truth. My Aunt Genevieve met me at the gate in Durham. She didn't ask 1,000 questions. She just wrapped me in a long, tight hug that smelled of lavender and strength. I've got your room all ready, baby girl, she said. Take your time. The first few weeks were quiet. I slept. I read. I took long walks in the Duke Forest. I helped my aunt in her garden. I did nothing that was for anyone but myself. And slowly, the pins and needles feeling in my soul gave way to a steady, warm flow. I was coming back to myself. I hired a lawyer in New Orleans remotely. The divorce was surprisingly straightforward. Garrett, through his own lawyer, tried to make a claim on my savings, arguing that my income had supported his business development. My lawyer calmly presented the bank statements from my personal account, showing the payment for his PMP certification and the tax records showing the quarterly payments I'd made on his behalf. The claim was dropped. His attempt to audit me failed. After a month, I started looking for a job. My skills were in demand. I had 3 offers within 2 weeks. I accepted a position as a senior audit manager for a biotech firm in the Research Triangle. It came with a 20% raise and a team of my own. My first day, they handed me a laptop and a corporate card. The responsibility was entirely my own. My new life began to take shape. It was a quiet life, a simple one, but it was mine. Every decision, every expense, every plan was my own. I started auditing my own days. I would wake up and ask myself, what is the claim for today? The claim is peace. The claim is purpose. The claim is joy. Then I would go about my day, collecting the receipts. A walk in the morning sun, a productive meeting at work, a long phone call with an old friend, dinner with my aunt. At the end of the day, I would look at the ledger, and it always balanced. There was no gap between the life I was claiming and the life I was living. About 6 months after I left, I had one final video call with Garrett to finalize the division of our things. His face appeared on my laptop screen. He looked tired, thinner. The background of his office was messy, with papers piled up where my neat filing system used to be. He was trying to be civil, but there was a deep well of resentment behind his eyes. "So, the movers will come on Friday," I said, "all business. I've sent you the inventory list. Please just make sure they have access." "Yeah, fine," he mumbled. Then he looked at me, a strange, pleading look on his face. "You look good, Naima." "I'm well, Garrett." "Look," he said, leaning into the camera. "I've had a lot of time to think, and I know I messed up. I took you for granted. I should have valued you more." It was the apology I had once longed for, but hearing it now, it was like finding a receipt for an expense that had been written off years ago. It was just a piece of paper. It had no value. "The problem, Garrett," I said, my voice gentle but firm, "is that you see value as something to be extracted. I'm not a stock you invest in, hoping for a return. I was supposed to be your partner." He had no answer to that. We finished the call, and I closed the laptop. I felt no anger, no bitterness, just a quiet, sad distance. He was a man from a past life, a closed account, a finalized audit. He was no longer my business. I've learned that love shouldn't require a constant forensic audit. You shouldn't have to spend your life searching for proof, digging through the receipts of your days to see if the claims of affection and partnership are backed by the reality of action. True partnership is self-evident. It balances its own books every single day. For years, I thought my greatest strength was my ability to create order from chaos, to build systems that supported others. I was wrong. My greatest strength was the quiet, unwavering ability to recognize the truth when it was finally presented. My life's most important audit wasn't of a travel budget or a corporate expense account. It was of my own heart. I found a material discrepancy, a fatal flaw in the system, and I had the courage to write it off. My books are balanced now. Every entry is my own. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.